Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. The methods used by cyber attackers are changing due to the advancements in technology. Joining me to discuss is Ed Amoroso, CEO of Tag Cyber, to help business leaders understand what they need from their technology to protect and support their businesses. Ed, it is great to have you live at MarketSite. It's good to have people back in Times Square with us.
Nice to see you, Jill.
And Russia and Ukraine war continues to rage on. Cybersecurity threats are abundant. It's real right now. And you've conducted a lot of research over the past 2 decades. Is there anything that your models are telling you that either correlate to what you've seen in the past 2 years or what we should be looking for going forward?
Unfortunately they do, and it's a little depressing. I use the analogy, you might have heard of the name Roger Bannister. He's the guy who ran the 4-minute mile the first time. Before he did that, nobody thought you could do it. After he ran the 4-minute mile, everybody did it. And cyber attacks have been like that, where you don't think a thing can happen, but then you see it happen, and suddenly there's a progression of that event happening at scale. So it allows you to kind of predict what's happening by looking at indicators and watching what's happening in the field. So the predictive models are a little depressing right now.
Let's talk about cyber warfare. What is it exactly? What's the history of it been?
Well, I mean, it's when cyber is the main dish in warfare. Normally, conventional warfare involves, military guns and planes and ships and things that are more tangible. And the digital or electronic component is usually a complement to that. It's usually something that's used as maybe even a side dish. Cyber war involves the inverse of that, where the electronic attacks, the cyber attacks, are the main way you accomplish some kinetic goal, like frankly, taking over a territory, killing people. So that's a definition of cyber war that's more or less agreed on across the industry.
And outside of the Ukraine conflict, I mean, the past 2 years with the pandemic really shifted everything we do from living to working. What are the risks associated when you're in a cloud environment, particularly when you're thinking about remote and hybrid work?
Well, I think cloud is better for most companies. Think of a small company, running infrastructure and trying to deal with a nation state threat. I think it's in their interest to have Microsoft, Google, Amazon in their court helping them protect data. So we're big proponents of using cloud to make yourself more secure, as opposed to what a lot of people were saying years ago is, oh my gosh, I'm throwing my stuff off into cloud, it's going to be less secure. I don't think that's right. I think you're better off having a large company as a partner.
So when you have your customers coming to you, what are they telling you? What are they doing in response to what we're seeing right now?
They're terrified, and usually because it's an unfair fight. In the early days of cybersecurity, you were dealing with hackers. You probably remember sort of the sensibility of like a young teenager goofing around and doing things maybe just for fun or to see if it could be done. That's gone out the window. Now it's nation states coming after companies. And when you're a small company or a mid-sized, even if you're a large company, it's a very unfair fight when it's a nation state coming after you. So I'm not sure there's even a good answer to that, because government is not well set up to say step in and monitor your website or help you with your network. We don't want that in our society. So it's a little bit of a conundrum. We're all on our own. We'd like help from government, but we're afraid to have government do the types of things it would really need to do, surveillance and control and monitoring. Who wants that? So it's a real problem right now.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up hackers. And I remember at the start of the Ukraine-Russia war, we had hacktivists, right? Yeah. And at first it's like, oh, great. But then you take a step back, and if they can hack into Russia, they can certainly hack into anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's true. Let's take hacktivists.
Right.
It's hard not to root for them a little bit when they're doing something you agree with, but it's double-edged sort of sword there, right? I mean, let's face it, if they can do it, then others can do it to us. So I'm not sure it's a great idea to be promoting hacktivism, even when you hear about, say, a bunch of hackers taking out, say, Russian websites. There's a lot of people who would root for that, but I'm not sure that's the solution. It's certainly not a long-term solution. We need something that's a little bit more focused on improving our defenses and making a lot of these cyber attacks less effective.
What types of technologies are attackers using?
They're using everything. They could go as high as using artificial intelligence and these advanced methods, but sadly they still use some pretty basic stuff, things you and I deal with every day, like phishing, social engineering. That's still the first step. If you solve that, then you do force the adversary to go to a little bit more difficult method. but the nation states can do that. So it's not sufficient to just solve the easy stuff, but that's definitely the first step.
How do you see newer technologies like AI, for example, mitigating these risks?
I think we need it. I think we need really smart technology. There was an old David Letterman bit where he had a humidifier and a dehumidifier fighting it out in a room. I think cyber security is moving toward that, where offense will be automated and our defense will be automated. And the only way you can keep yourself protected is to have better technology. That's why we need to be investing in research and science and technology.
Right. So how are you advising security leaders and business leaders to protect their infrastructure, their data, the proprietary information?
You know, my answer might surprise you. What we tell everyone is the best thing you can do to protect infrastructure is go find your sixth grader and take your sixth grader, sit your son or daughter down and help them with their math homework. Like, that's what we need. Our nation needs young people to be inspired again to do math and science. If we don't do that, we're going to have trouble in cybersecurity. It's almost like in the 60s, we were inspired by NASA and astronauts. A whole generation of young people were attracted to engineering because that was such a wonderful project and had such great implication for society. Today, it's very difficult to find young people who really want to go into computing. It's generally kids that are from other countries seem to be more attracted than, say, here in the United States.
Yeah, and to your point, I was reading, I believe it was in the journal, that there's over 600,000 open positions in cybersecurity and the technologies that we need to help mitigate this risk and you know, potentially say it's kids growing up via the benefit of STEM jobs where everything is available on demand and you want an instant return, but you have to understand the technology that goes into said apps and the different ways that we're protecting institutions. Are there specific risks to financial institutions?
Well, yes. I mean, obviously, a nation state wanting to target, say, U.S. critical infrastructure could inject some real confidence issues for you and me and everyone if there are attacks that work on the financial institutions. I used to sit on the board of a large bank, and we worried about it all the time. So there's no question, but it's broader than that. It's all critical infrastructure that I think is very much at risk.
Are you surprised we haven't seen any more attacks or particularly involvement with China? It seems to be a little bit quiet on that front.
Not a bit. The patterns are always that way. You see a little bit of some skirmish and issue. Like we saw this attack in 2010 called Stuxnet that involved essentially an attacker, a lot of people think it was US or Israel, going after an Iranian centrifuge, finding it, spinning it out of control, causing an explosion, literally a kinetic explosion from a cyber attack, just a chilling attack. We've seen almost nothing like that for the last, say, 12 years. The predictive models suggest that pretty soon we're going to see a rash of those types of things. It's always been that pattern, so quiet periods are very normal.
Quiet periods are also very scary for the
scary.
same reason. Sometimes no noise should give you some concern. Do you have any predictions about the types of things that will be important to mitigating risk? Cyber insurance as an example?
Well, it could be. Insurance is a decent idea, but I think simplifying things. Like if you just think about anything in your life that you're trying to protect, your home, your garage, your car, your whatever, understanding it and removing complexity is the first step toward simplifying and the first step toward making things more secure. So people running businesses, if you've got a network, if you've got systems, if you've got apps that you don't understand, that's a bad sign. That means that there's probably insecurities there. So we always tell people, simplify, turn things off that can be turned off, take the time to understand what you're running. That's very simple, sensible stuff. Doesn't cost you a lot of money. Everyone from small business owners to massive government agencies, they can all benefit from that.
And that was my last question to you. Is it going to take a private-public sector effort to execute on this?
It does. You know, I mean, we've always been pretty good at that. Government and industry have worked together, and the present Biden administration does a good job of that. That's an area where they do seem to understand well the importance of information sharing, cooperation, coordination. I think they do a nice job there. The problem, again, is that they don't own infrastructure. I think most of the estimates are something like 85% of our critical infrastructure is owned privately. So what's government going to do? They can only do so much. So it's really up to you and me and the people watching and moms and dads and businesses. We're the new front. It's not like some far off European front like in World War II. The front's right here. and that makes it difficult for government to really do much other than to try to help us.
All right, Ed, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.